If you want, you move it further to the side too, so people can see Bob.
Over here?
too.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Not about me.
Good.
Yeah, that's it. As you get low. I gotta go back down.
Just remember one last year. Direction straight.
About ready? Okay, I think we are good and ready to go.
All right, everybody's ready?
Yep.
Good morning. I'm Sheriff Jason Mikesville with the Teller County Sheriff's Office. I wanted to reach back out to our media and allow you and let you know what we're doing with one of the cases that we've had, and really talk about our partnership with ICE and really what it's done for us here at the Teller County Sheriff's Office in the community of Teller County. Early last week, our ICE partnership was able to contact and detain a person of interest in one of our cases. That was the case was involving the death of Eduardo Castaneda. That case for us has been an ongoing issue because we weren't able to find the person or contact the person that may have been involved, and so that we could speak with them. We notified our ICE partnership folks with that, and they were able to identify the person and detain him on other issues that didn't involve the Teller County Sheriff's Office, but he is being held by ICE custody. That brings up the point that I want to make on a couple different issues that are now happening in Colorado that are going to affect law enforcement. Right now, the legislative body is moving to push forward on a bill called SB 276. SB 276 is a very comprehensive document that really attempts to stop all law enforcement in Colorado from assisting any federal investigation working with ICE throughout Colorado. And here's some of the effects that we're starting to see. In the state of Colorado right now, there's really a false narrative. That false narrative is that ICE is coming into communities and they're taking people out of schools and really dealing with children. I've been a sheriff for 28 years. I've never seen that with ICE. I've been the lead on working with ICE for multiple of these types of events, and we've never had that happen. So I want to dispel the rumors and myths that really the legislator is presenting in testimony that this is happening in Colorado. I've not seen it done in any of the work that we have done. So I wanted to talk about that false narrative. But I do want to talk to you about what's really happening at the state legislature and really with the state administration right now. We are a state that is harboring fugitives and really stopping anyone from being able to contact people that have been incarcerated. And this is really what's happening. We as a state are a sanctuary state. We are protecting convicted criminals that are on parole, in prisons, in jails, and on probation. I have to tell you, if they're incarcerated those same people, when they asked us to do transfer, and this is what this bill stops, they don't want us to transfer these criminals to federal agencies or to federal ICE members inside of our facilities. What that does, though, is it means that those people have to be targeted outside of our facilities, in local communities. And I've just spoke with large community groups about this same issue. So as they're attempting to do target investigations outside of our criminal areas where we keep criminals, they're then having to come into local communities, which is now putting our communities at risk of crossfire with known gang members and known criminals throughout the state of Colorado. That's unfortunate because it also is putting my officers at risk of having to deal with those things. These bills, SB 276 and 25-1100, that have come into effect in this state, which I believe the SB 276 will probably pass upon governor approval, really causes a lot of issues in the state of Colorado. But here's the other side of this. It forces ICE into the communities instead of in our jails where there's actually people in custody. While contacting these criminals in the community that are undocumented, they'll also deal with undocumented folks that may be hardworking that they're now going to have to deal with because they're going into the communities attempting to target the criminals. That's what that legislation is causing. And I know our state legislators want to protect people, but really what they're doing is they're protecting only the most dangerous of criminals throughout Colorado. Again, our state legislator and administration, you're protecting criminals, rapists, homicide suspects, people that target and prey on the elderly for financial gain, human trafficking suspects. All of those types of people that do exploitation of children and sexual assault on women is who you are actually protecting through these bills. I don't know how to say it enough or how many times it has to be said, but that is really what you're doing. It also allows, if a law enforcement officer makes a mistake and assists ICE in our facilities or allows them into our facilities, it now makes it to where a law enforcement officer would have to pay up to a $50,000 fine. A $50,000 fine. It's the first time in Colorado state history that we have ever created a law that specifically goes after an individual at either a state level or a county level or a police law officer in any level or any information that they may be giving out to ICE or other federal investigations. Here's the scary part for law enforcement. My officers just make just over that mark of $50,000. So now it's more like a blackmail, and it's more like we are trying to harm our law enforcement officers for making the right decisions, following their oath. But strategically, what it really does is puts us in between a state law that was really identified and designed to be a political move to point at the federal government, saying that we are not going to accept or work with the federal government. You have to understand that puts law enforcement in a really critical position because we also have to follow federal laws. We can't just say no to laws, but it also identifies Colorado as being the one state that really identifies and says that we will not follow federal law. How do we do that as a state? That really puts us at risk, and it's putting my officers at risk, and I do not appreciate it for any of Colorado. And again, in the state of Colorado, we're doubling down against federal law. But here's the other problem when we start identifying one federal organization. Under federal guidelines right now, all federal organizations, the FBI, HSI, DEA, ATF, are all now given powers of federal authority for immigration. That means they're all federal immigration officers. How do we as local law enforcement then determine that we shouldn't work with any of these organizations? So if we have a known terrorist or known cartel member, am I not to give that information anymore to our federal partners? Are we to allow them to continue to prey on innocent people here in Colorado? That's what I'm asking you. And I'm hopeful the governor's actually listening today with his staff and can understand the plight that we are under with SB 256. I think it's dangerous. I think it's dangerous for Colorado, and it's really dangerous for my organization and all other law enforcement throughout the state. Once again, you're only protecting criminals in this state. It also has a larger piece to deal with on our federal monies that come into the state of Colorado. It's going to force us into a position where we may lose federal funding. And that's a very big issue for us, and we're already starting to see it, especially as we move into our fire issues with our forests. Really think about this. At the end of the day, our federal partners are the ones that pay for most of our forest fires in the state. How are we going to deal with that when they don't pay for those things anymore and we're moving into a very drastic fire season? I'm very concerned as a sheriff how that's going to affect my communities and how it's going to deal with all the people that are having to pay for these types of fires in Colorado. So what I wanted to do is turn it over to Dan Williams, our county commissioner, so that he could speak also. Dan?
Thanks, Jason. Good morning. I'm here with Commissioners Eric Stone and Bob Campbell in solidarity and support with Jason Meixel. Also, welcome to ICE. I appreciate it, Robert, you being here. Hey, I want to put a point on this. This is serious, and Jason brought it up. County government is the last government that's closest to the people. We're approached in grocery stores. We talk to our people every day. We can't be activist or removed. So let's talk about the implications of what's going on. I swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States, state of Colorado, and to obey state laws, just like the administration, just like our activist legislature did. By the way, it's the same oath that I took when I was a soldier for 30 years. You cannot legislate and tell me that we can't follow federal laws. So here's what's going to happen, and I want to put a small or a tight point on this. Yesterday, the administration, President Trump went ahead and signed a executive order. That's pretty clear. He's given Colorado as a sanctuary state Denver as a sanctuary city, and others in the United States 30 days. After 30 days, it is pretty clear in Section 3, we will lose federal grants. They may be terminated, they may be suspended. So what does that mean for your listeners? I'm going to tell you what it means in Colorado. It's $18.4 billion of federal money that we would lose, or 22.2% of Colorado's budget. Medicaid, schools, school districts, care for the elderly. We're already seeing the impacts. And look, in case we've forgotten, the state of Colorado was already $1.3 billion in the hole. Those implications and those impacts have already reached Teller County. All 4 of our food banks, for example, have lost money, causing us to have to go for other resources. Elder care. Jason really carefully talked about fire season. Look, we've already got FEMA in some sort of form that may or may not respond, and we're in fire season now. We had 35 knot winds this week. We've got a really dry season. So what's going to happen when we defy the federal government? There's a way to talk to the federal government if you disagree with the President of the United States or the administration. It's through decorum, it's through face-to-face meetings, it's through the legal system. But to simply say no is not authorized. There are 64 counties in Colorado, and we've become pretty vocal right now because the impacts to the decisions that are being made in Denver are directly impacting us. There are 22.3 million acres of forest. Half of this county is national forest. We just had a fire about 2 weeks ago. If our federal partners don't come, if withheld funds impact our ability to do life, health, safety, that's wrong. And so I would just ask, I have 2 asks today. One ask of our governor and to an activist legislature, please stop being activist. They've stopped listening to county commissioners, which, by the way, is the oldest form of government in the United States. It predates 1776 in the federal government. Listen to your county commissioners. We're telling you that we're sitting on a powder keg. It is not an option to walk away from the federal government. It is not an option in Colorado. You won't recognize Colorado after this summer if we lose federal funding. So I would ask the legislature to overturn these bills that Jason talked about, to ask yourself why you're preventing local law enforcement from working with federal law enforcement. This whole democratic experiment relies on local governments, municipal governments working with the state and working with the feds. What if counties in Colorado, all 64 of us, said we'll stop working with the state of Colorado? That's unheard of. We don't even think about that because we respect the rule of law. I'd ask the state to respect the rule of law as well. My ask of the federal government, there are counties like Teller County who will comply with federal law, and we'd ask that if there are cuts, if there are punishments, if there are second and third order impacts of withholding of grants, that you look at the counties that are compliant, counties that have sheriffs like Jason Meixel are doing the right thing, who work with ICE, not for political reasons, for the life, health, safety of our people. So again, that's my ask to you. I'd ask that we reverse these trends, that Colorado publicly say it is not a sanctuary state, and demonstrate that by the reversal of some of these previous bills, and bills that, by the way, are being introduced right now in the last week of a 5-month legislature with absolutely no stakeholding. That's not representative government. That's tyranny of the majority. It needs to stop. So with that, Jason, I'll turn it over to you or to any other commissioners, your call.
What I'd like to do is turn it over for questions from the press so that we can have a dialogue as to these issues and really maybe a way forward. So.
I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about this picture.
Yeah, so this is Eduardo Castaneda. So he is a person of interest in a case that we have where we did have someone that we found that was deceased. So right now we're working with ICE, our partners, to be able to speak with that person and really go through the active investigation that we have. But he was a person of interest that has been located by ICE, and they have detained on their own crime or issues. So right now we're working with them closely. But if I did not have that federal partner to be able to locate that person, we would not have located him. And I think that's very important to understand. Without their investigation and their capabilities, we would have still been looking for this person to have those discussions with about a person of interest about our case.
Sheriff, so he's being held in ICE custody right now. Is he going to be deported before the investigation concludes, or are they going to hold him until you guys are able to finish your investigation, and if that possibly leads to charges?
You know, I actually have an ICE representative today, Robert Coltrip, who's a good friend and then has been a partner to the Teller County Sheriff's Office and agencies across the state for multiple years. And I'll ask him to answer any questions he could.
Sure. First, I'll start with, my name is Robert Coltrip. I'm an Assistant Field Office Director for Immigration and Customs Enforcement here in Colorado. I primarily oversee enforcement operations in southern Colorado, which brought us to our relationship with Teller County. I want to thank the Teller County Sheriff, Jason Meixel, for having unwavering support of our mission when it comes to public safety efforts. You know, this is a primary mission of our agency. So as we move towards your question, Sanchez Chavez was arrested by one of my teams in southern Colorado because we knew he was a subject of interest. We also had our own immigration reasons in order to arrest or target this individual because our agency targets individuals who are non-citizens, not in the country legally, that have no lawful status, and are amenable to removal. We have to establish PC as well, right? So we have PC, we arrested the individual. He is now in our detention facility, and he is available for questioning from our local partner. I'm not sure what the specifics are on his case as far as immigration is concerned, but we will keep them there as long as it takes for our partner to communicate with him without violating his due process. Because due process is important in these cases. Everyone that we do arrest is afforded due process. They go to either an immigration judge to plead their case, they're allowed representation, and then if a judge orders them to be removed, we execute that removal. That's part of our job. If the judge gives them a benefit or grants them a benefit, then there's another process in which they have to abide by in order to adjust status. But I would like to just say over and over again to dispel the rumors of due process, that is not true. We afford due process to everybody that's in our custody per the law. Hopefully that answered your question.
It does. I have another question, more about the raid that just happened in Colorado Springs this weekend. I know the DEA said 114 people were detained by ICE for being in the country illegally. Do you have any update on where those people are and kind of what their status is? I know ICE told us over this weekend they're still in process.
Yes, I can give you minimal information on that action because that's an active investigation with the DEA. But what I can tell you is we were part of the investigation and the action, right? We were there on scene. We took roughly 100 into custody. I don't know what the exact numbers are, but we can circle back after this and I can get you in touch with our PAO to get that exact number. But we took roughly 100 people into custody. But I would like to emphasize that event because that's a perfect example of collaboration amongst federal, state, and local partners, right? We're stronger together. We're more effective as a unit when we work together in order to keep our communities safe and focus on our public safety mission. And that's a perfect example of what's at stake if additional legislation is changed or is passed on top of the current legislation that already limits our cooperation and ability to work with state and local partners.
Is the state at this point, now that he is in your hands, is the state law hindering your guys' investigation and what you can and can't do at this point?
With this individual here?
Yes, and the ones taken into custody.
No. Once they're into our custody, the state does not bar us from anything once they're in our custody. But I can review two pieces of legislation that currently do prohibit, cooperation with local and state entities. So first is House Bill 191124. So when that bill was passed, it specifically targeted our detainer process. So I'll explain that process to you so that you understand. As far as ICE is concerned, when somebody is arrested, say in the Teller County Jail, I'll use this example, and during the booking process, it's determined that they are not born in the United States. That's a trigger to initiate communication with us, to initiate our investigation, right? We're going to use a myriad of databases, an interview in order to determine alienage or their citizenship, their status in the country, and their removability. Those are the elements that are required for probable cause to make that arrest. Okay? Once that is done, we would like to place a detainer with a warrant of arrest with the county jail. Once that individual is done with either their criminal proceedings or post a bond, we request that they notify us and give us time to respond to the jail in order to make that arrest in a custodial setting. It makes sense. It's better for the safety of our officers. It's better for the safety of the subject that we want to arrest, perform our enforcement action on, and the community as well, right? It's just common sense. So we prefer to do that. It's called our Criminal Alien Program. That's our program that initiates those enforcement encounters, right? So the legislation targets that program. And right now, as it's written, we can place a detainer with the county, but when it's time for them to release, they notify us, and they have to release them on their normal time frame, which is sometimes 30 minutes, an hour, or 2 hours, depending on the workload or whatever the variables are in the county. And I'll let the sheriff explain that if you know, when he gets an opportunity. But it doesn't allow us to safe custodial transfers, very limited. If we get here in time, we get them. But if we don't, we don't. They're released to the community. Some counties allow us to go into a custodial environment, others do not. Denver County is an example of that. And it was mentioned in congressional testimony on the Hill when we had to wrestle a TDA member in the parking lot after being arrested and released into the community, because we're going to do our job. Public safety is important to us. We're going to get there when we can get there. But the law prohibits that. And then I want to get into the specifics of the probation element. So what the state has done is it's created a shield for individuals that have gone through our judicial process after an arrest with a conviction, and it's barred probation from sharing personal information with us and assisting us with a collaborative effort to make an arrest. It is creating sanctuary for an individual that has committed a crime outside of entering the country illegally. That's a secondary crime, correct? I think we all agree with that. Then let's look at Senate Bill 21-1100, which limits the exchange of PII from state employees with federal immigration officers in regards to our enforcement actions. That bill has limited the Colorado State Patrol, Colorado Department of Corrections, and parole. So prior to that bill, if an individual was arrested, gone through the judicial process, convicted of a crime, and sentenced to the Department of Corrections, they would notify us if we did not have an active detainer on them, if during their biographical, we're working through the biographical information that this person may have, they would notify us, initiate an investigation, and if we had PC, we'd place a detainer and a warrant of arrest. They would notify us of a release, and we would pick up that person when he releases, when he completes his time or is granted parole. Now that doesn't occur because they can't share that information with us. And we've seen a drastic decrease of apprehensions and enforcement actions with collaboration of the Department of Corrections since that bill came into effect, I believe, January 1st of 2022. Don't hold me to that. But yeah, early 2022. And we've seen a significant decrease, I think of roughly 70 or 60%, but I can get you those exact numbers after this. So again, someone that was convicted of a crime went to DOC and we can't collaborate to pick them up before they're released to the community. Let's take it a step further. Now they go to parole. Now that when they're on the parole, we somehow determine that this person is in our community. We can't reach out to parole for collaboration, right? It's just not common sense. So the agency had to pivot. And to go back to what Sheriff Mikesell has said, we're going to do our public safety mission. So we pivoted to focusing our assets into the community. So instead of picking people up in a secure environment, which makes sense, we now send an enforcement team of 5, 6, 7 individuals into the community in order to find our target. That means that puts our officers at an additional risk. It puts our subject at an additional risk and members of the community when it all could have been handled in a secure setting. Does that make sense? Thank you.
I've got another question for you. This is kind of going back to the raid in Colorado Springs.
Sure.
Because I think it is a good example of kind of what you guys are talking about, the cooperation or collaboration,
Mhm.
right? And we're just curious, I guess, how were you guys able to figure out so many illegal immigrants were in there so quickly?
So I can't get into the specifics of the operation, like I said, because that's a DEA operation. But what I can tell you is that the men and women of ERO, ICE, are very competent with their jobs. And when we deploy our force in order to assist, we could accommodate their needs in order to triage those individuals, establish PC, and make those arrests. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it seems like that bill, if an officer here, one of the sheriff's officers, would be scared to go out in the community to somebody he knows, because he might get a $50,000 fine, right? I mean, so already.
Are you talking about the new bill that's proposed?
Bill if it passes.
I'll leave that to the sheriff. I'm not really familiar with all the intricacies of that bill. I can speak about what is passed and how it affects us. I can give you ICE's perspective. But what's forthcoming, you know, that's outside of my lane.
And I'm not sure about kids in school. I'm not sure that they're not going into schools, ICE, in Denver at least, I know not here.
As far as my knowledge, we have not been into a school to arrest a child.
The kids are scared to death, is from what you read, and parents are scared.
Well, I'll let the sheriff answer that. I can talk about enforcement things, but our policy allows us to make arrests in those areas if we have a target of interest. Again, we prioritize the worst of the worst and public safety threats, and that's what our agency does.
Do you sometimes feel isolated, your agency, from like local law enforcement with all these things that the state's put on you? Has the whole landscape changed over the last few years?
Sure, that would be more of an opinion question that comes from you, which I won't go down that road. But yeah, it does make it tough. And to expand upon that, I'm a congressional liaison officer for ERO as well, and I've spoken to many congressional members. And one of the things I've mentioned is, you know, the men and women of ICE are doing their job. You know, we have authority that's bestowed upon us from Congress. We are federal law enforcement officers. And it makes it really tough when you hear the rhetoric, when you hear the false accusations, and, you know, it makes it hard on our workforce that are out there doing their jobs. They're also members of the communities, right? They're often doxxed. There's issues with, you know, their identities, you know, people publishing their identities. And these men and women are just doing their jobs. They're doing what the government has asked them to do. They're doing what the law asks them to do. So, yeah, it can be tough at times.
And can you kind of mention again, like your priorities, like you're going for high-level targets first, and then kind of like who's your number one, all the way down to like if there's illegal aliens working in the field and they're not a nuisance or public hazard, are they pretty low on your priority list at looking at them?
Sure, I can talk about how we prioritize our, you know, our cases, but it's not absolute, right? So when you look at our minimal workforce and what we're trying to cover, right, collaboration again with local, state, and federal partners is critical. But if you look at our workforce and what we're trying to do, we're trying to focus on those that are the biggest risk to our community, those who really, you know, create issues in the community. You know, obviously felons, multiple DUIs, DUI homicide. I mean, these are just some of the specifics. But I also want people to be aware that we may arrest someone that may not have a criminal conviction yet, but there's a nexus because there may be some ties to something else, gang activity, other things that bring our attention to them. But 99.9% of what we're trying to do focuses around some secondary criminal nexus other than entering the country illegally, which that in itself is a crime, but that is not the primary nexus.
Do you know if there's any more raids coming, or can you say?
You know I can't speak to that.
I mean, you guys always looking though for doing investigations?
We're always active. Again, our public safety mission is very important to us, and we're going to continue to work regardless of what the state law is. We are going to continue to work to protect our communities and protect the citizens of Colorado and the United States of America.
And then like compared to a year ago, are numbers up on deportations and ICE?
I don't know what those exact numbers are. I know publicly there's probably some numbers that have been presented to the public, but I don't want to make a comment on something that I'm not very familiar with.
Sheriff, I got one more question.
Okay, this has got to be the last one because I know the sheriff wants to get back up here.
Sheriff, I just got a question for you, the latest on this Sanchez Chavez case. Have your deputies gone to speak with him yet? I know
Nope.
there was some, you know, that you talked about ICE was holding him and, you know,
Yes.
he's available for interview. I just want to get the latest update.
Yes, we've started those talks, yeah. And then I did want to answer one more thing. Pat had a question about kind of the fear of parents about children in schools and really, here's what I found in the last few years of testifying at our legislatures. A lot of this is activism, right? There's a serious push to make Colorado citizens so scared that they're going to follow and fight the federal government on these things also. I will tell you, it's what I call baloney, right? There is no form or fact that would talk about those things in Colorado. I have testified on a bill we tried to bring, which was 047 this year, which talked about those issues, identified those facts. And every single legislature that spoke out against this bill brought up these issues, even though it specifically talked about not doing those things, not doing raids or roundups, not doing stop and ask for papers, not doing those things that you hear every single day. And every person that I heard that came to actually testify against our bill brought up things that have not been in existence in 20 years. So that false narrative of what I would call professional activists to scare communities goes on every single day. And that's why it's the best thing we can do is get in front of you and speakers that are pushing that, are creating fear in communities and really scaring people where it shouldn't be. This should be very simple to deal with criminal operations inside of jails, inside of penitentiaries, inside of probation, inside of parole, because they're already convicted. Why do you want them to step foot back into the communities that they're victimizing? Because here's the thing, those people work for cartels, those criminals. Those people are pushing a lot of the fraud, the scamming that you see on your credit cards, the sexual trafficking, the sexual exploitation of children. Those are the ones that these laws, the hardworking people that just keep their head down, trying to make a better lives for themselves. Because those are good people. And I think they're trying to go through the process to be here legally. They're doing all those things. They're not committing crimes. All of this has been specific in this state for law enforcement in Colorado to go after and deal with the criminal elements. And that's what these state legislatures, through these bills, are protecting. Criminals. And I want to make that plain to everybody. These are criminals, not good people. And that's what I want to have you understand, was the knowledge of what we are trying to deal with are those criminals. Any further questions?
In this case, from the time that the crime happened to the time that you guys got him, did he stick around in the community or did he flee, and was that typical when this happens?
Well, there's several parts to that question because this is a person of interest, right? We don't know if he's committed a crime or not. We know that he may know about a crime. So we're speaking with him. Do we see people that try to abscond from justice because they are from another country and can move about and do things illegally? Absolutely. We see that all the time. And we've had multiple cases in this county, in multiple places in other counties and other sheriffs that I talk to. So yes.
And does the state law make getting these people harder, or is it because you are working directly with ICE, is it easier for you?
Well, it makes it absolutely harder. But here's a couple different things that these laws do. And you'll hear legislatures and you'll hear talking heads talk about all these issues about how, well, Colorado law enforcement, we're holding them accountable. Sure we are on your tax dime, right? So your tax dimes are holding these people. Your tax dimes are spending about $26 million to $140 million every year just on people that are criminals from other countries here, which could be given to ICE and reduce those costs. So yeah, it's a big issue. But the other side of that too is that, you know, we deal with people every single day. To work with immigration and enforcement on things that they're dealing with for those criminals to remove them, wouldn't it be helpful that we could give them information about where somebody's at so that they don't have to go somewhere where it's more dangerous? Or because you got to think, these ICE agents live in our communities. They're part of our communities. They're part of the communities that you're talking about. They understand those things, and we are treating them so poorly in this state, even though they are American citizens, they are Colorado citizens. What about our Colorado citizens? What about our victims? You want to talk about one of the worst things to happen in Colorado is that somebody that has had an interaction with a criminal that is from another country as a victim, you have lost your rights. You have no rights because the state of Colorado is going to hide those issues so that you, the victim, you're going to be treated much different, right? Because nobody wants to talk about the fact that how many victims these cases are creating. And we're releasing them back into communities and they're re-victimizing people every single day. Folks, I just want to say thank you for coming out and speaking with us today. I hope this is enlightening for a lot of people in Colorado. But I will tell you this now, we would love an opportunity to sit down with the governor and have a discussion with my county commissioners and I and other sheriffs as to why these bills hurt, because there has been very little stakeholder meeting with anybody that understands these issues. That's the problem. I've become an expert in this field of immigration and really the criminal side of matters, and not once has anybody ever sat down with me and had a discussion about these issues. We have sent letters. We have tried to do whatever we could to work with the governor's office on this. And frankly, I'm tired of my deputies being prosecuted by sometimes the media and then sometimes our legislatures, and in the fact that we are now going to have my officers pay $50,000 up to as a fine, that money goes to a fund to protect people that are in immigration processes in the state, because the state has created a $5 million fund, and those fees are now going to go to that. And then on top of that, the governor of Colorado has now created a position for whomever is going to look at officers throughout the state of Colorado to look at those fines, to go after people. It's sad and it's ridiculous to me that that is occurring in our state. So thank you for the day. I appreciate it. I hope to see you soon, and have a great day.